Hello there. Welcome in to a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app, of course, is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics relating definitely to the Broncos game yesterday. Coming your way, don't forget a doubleheader for Monday Night Football tonight. First, Bucks and Texans, followed by Chargers, Raiders for first place in the AFC West. We've got both of them for you coming up here. Let's adjust this. Who's messing with my camera here? There we go. A little bit better. We'll get it worked out. I would like to hear from you. I really would. 719-247-1313 is the number if you want to call or text into the show. And I'll get into the mistakes that were made late in the game that helped the Indianapolis Colts beat the Denver Broncos 29-28 yesterday. But my question, and I'm going to answer my own question by saying no, did it have to come to that? And the answer is no. The Broncos defense, supposedly one of the best in the league, gave up just 4 fewer points than the Dolphins did a week ago, and the Dolphins felt like they needed to have a players-only meeting. Right? That doesn't sound right. The Broncos gave up 4 fewer points than a team that is in absolute shambles in the Miami Dolphins. You are supposedly the best defense in the NFL, and you don't force the Indianapolis Colts to punt once? Not once? This is supposed to be no-fly zone 2.0. That's what I was told. And Daniel Jones throws for over 300 yards? And think about what the score would have been had the referees, because I know I'm just going to get out in front of this now before we get to the leverage call. How about the 2 pass interference penalties that weren't called in the end zone on the first 2 drives for the Colts? Could you imagine if those were called, which they very well could have been, what the score would have been at that point? Denver just handed $200 million to Zach Allen and Nick Bonito, and they combined for 0 sacks. The only guy who got to Daniel Jones was Justin Stranad, who wasn't even supposed to be playing in the game. And that's where it starts for me. Why did it go so wrong for the Broncos defense? It starts with the pass rush. The Indianapolis Colts completely negated the best thing that the Broncos do. Overall, taking all 3 phases, the best thing the Broncos do is rush the passer, and they couldn't do it yesterday. And you see everything else become vulnerable because of it. I was just on with Jessica Mendoza at KKTV last week saying I don't buy the hype when it comes to the Broncos secondary, obviously outside of Pat Surtain. I think they're good. I don't think they're elite. And you saw that yesterday. I mean, even Pat Surtain gave up a few catches, but let's be fair here. A couple of those were just great ball placement and good catches by the receiver. I don't think Surtain has too much to be upset about on those plays. But look at the rest of the secondary. And especially look at the guys in front of the secondary, this second level. Singleton and Stranad, give Stranad credit for getting the only sack of the day, but Singleton and Stranad got burnt repeatedly by the Indianapolis Colts. And that we can all agree on. Why do you think they brought in Dre Greenlaw? Like, we knew inside linebacker was a position of weakness for the Denver Broncos, and the Indianapolis Colts exploited it. And you can't say that you didn't see this. You can't completely say you didn't see it coming. And what I mean by that is there was that space at the second and third level of the Broncos defense quite a bit against the Tennessee Titans. There were guys that had a step on their defender. There were guys running in open space in week one. It just, fortunately for the Denver Broncos, Cam Ward's receivers dropped more passes than any other wide receiving core in the league. So the warning signs were there. I'm not going to sit here and say, even though I don't believe in the Broncos secondary, maybe like some people do, I'm not going to say that I expected the Broncos to not force a single punt. I thought that they would see the film from Tennessee and fix it. Because I thought that game had all the makings of being a facsimile of the Tampa game. You were going up against an incredibly banged up defense. You had the opportunity to really blow them out. And all you were asking, because the offense pretty much did their job for the entirety of the day. If we're sitting here saying the thing standing between the Broncos and a win, or the Broncos and a blowout, is the defense not getting stops, you didn't think that would be the case. Now, Sean Payton at halftime, I don't know if you caught his comments going into halftime. It was as he was jogging into the tunnel, but he kind of alluded to, and I don't think it was, no, it stopped just short of like throwing Vance Joseph under the bus, if we're being honest. He said that they were basically alluding to the fact that they were expecting the Colts to come out and run the football with Jonathan Taylor. I mean, you heard Vance Joseph last week say this.
The back is the key.
He started there. People want to ask about Tyler Warren. He's like, no, Jonathan Taylor. And he alluded to the fact that they were prepared to stop the run, and then the Colts just went pass. I mean, they looked kind of like the Denver Broncos did a week ago against the Titans, where we all thought that the Broncos were going to come out and run the football, and they just decided to sling it around the yard in the first quarter. So, okay, you go in with the plan, and the Colts kind of go counter to that. All right, so how long does that last? A drive, 2 drives? I could see those first couple of drives being a Broncos team that was geared up to stop the run, and the Colts didn't run it. Okay, but we're talking about the entirety of the game that the defense was on their heels, that the defense couldn't keep Indianapolis off the board. And then when the Colts did run it, Jonathan Taylor ran for 165 yards. So even when the Colts did the thing that the Broncos expected, the thing that apparently they were geared up and preparing to beat all week long, even when they did that, Well, Jonathan Taylor ran all over him. Again, he did that last year. When this Broncos defense faded down the stretch, and I think they did. You look back, they faded a little bit. They were very good all season, but late in the year, we saw this defense wear down a little bit, and we saw this defense far less effective than it had been for the majority of the year. And what were the two things that they got exploited the most in? The run game and by receivers that Pat Surtain wasn't covering. And we saw a little bit of those two things against Tennessee, saw a lot of it against Indianapolis. It wasn't just Tyler Warren all day. It wasn't just Michael Pittman all day. It was Adonai Mitchell, and it was Downs, and it was I just want to call him Austin Collie, because remember Austin Collie, that receiver that they were throwing to? Remind me of Austin Collie. Can't think of the reason why, but they spread it around the very same way they did it against Miami. Essentially, what you have is no discernible difference between the defensive performance of the Miami Dolphins against the Indianapolis Colts in week 1 and the Denver Broncos performance against the Indianapolis Colts in week 2. Very little discernible difference. Daniel Jones had time. Daniel Jones was able to distribute the ball. And Jonathan Taylor was able to run it. If this team cannot sack the quarterback and bring consistent pressure on the quarterback, they're in big trouble. We've seen that. The thing, though, with the Denver Broncos is they're built to get consistent pressure. Right? You know the weakness with the inside linebackers. We could quarrel a little bit about this secondary, but, they only have one Pat Surtain. So you can understand where their secondary, Riley Moss, would be vulnerable. But the one thing that you bet on week in and week out, Broncos will be able to generate pressure. Of course they will. They'll bring 7-8 guys if they have to. I don't know the blitz rate from Vance Joseph, but I know their one sack came from a blitz. This is how this team is built. If they can't get pressure with all of those highly compensated players they have in their front seven, they're going to get picked apart. We saw it late last year, and we're seeing it already to start this season, which leads me to my bigger question. And I have been asking this question for weeks. Is this team better? Because they're going to have to be. Right? They're going to have to be better. Are they better? I talked about this through the preseason. Just look like business as usual, look like the 2024 Denver Broncos, look like they hadn't turned the page from the season before. That first game against the 49ers, both sides of the football left something to be desired. The defense got better as the preseason wore on. The offense really didn't. And you saw the offense really struggle week 1. Yesterday, they were the beneficiaries of the Colts being without their top 2 corners and their best pass rusher. But the defense don't look better to me. And is it just Dre Greenlaw? Once they get him, will everything be okay? Because I don't know when Dre Greenlaw is going to get on the field. And when he gets on the field, I wouldn't be shocked if he's off the field just as quickly as he gets back on the field, given his recent injury history. Through 2 games, you haven't seen an overall better Broncos team. And to get where they believe they can go and where a lot of people are saying they'll go, they have to be a better team. And the way that this should be looked at, this isn't the Broncos are a leverage call away from being 2-0. I think this is a team that you look at through 2 weeks and you say they're fortunate not to be 0-2. Sean Payton put all this into a fast start, the race to improve, all of this kind of stuff. Through 2 games, they're not improving. And they've run out of time. The schedule makers gifted them with these first 2 games. And this team, if you just watch them play, is closer to an 0-2 team than they are a 2-0 team. So it starts with me for the defense. Did it have to come to all of these little mistakes? I know everyone's going to focus on them, and I'll talk about them in the next segment, but I wanted to get to the defense first because that's where, to me, the Broncos really failed yesterday. They should be infinitely better than Miami was a week ago, and there was no discernible difference between what the Dolphins defense was able to do against Indy and what the Broncos. And that's unacceptable. As are the mistakes late in the game. But you got to put something at the top of the pyramid. I put the defense first. That's where the Broncos could have been better, should have been better, and we wouldn't even be talking about a J.K. Dobbins spike and a leverage penalty. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on yesterday's game. We will get into those mistakes and why they'll really be eating up Sean Payton. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. It's Noche Latina at Widener Field this Saturday, September 20th. Your Colorado Springs Switchbacks are taking on Sacramento Republic as they continue to push for the playoffs. Come check out the world-class soccer while celebrating Latin culture, capped off with a spectacular fireworks show. Kickoff is at 6 p.m. Tickets going fast. Grab yours now at switchbacksfc.com/tickets. Who is to blame? That's the game we play every Monday during the NFL season. Heck, that's the game we play on Sports Talk Radio, right? We do it with the Broncos losing to the Colts yesterday. Chuck has a little bit of an alternative take on it, which I certainly do appreciate. And I do appreciate Chuck taking the time to call in. So, Chuck, great to have you. Fire away.
Yeah, thank you so much. I enjoy listening to you as often as I can, which is quite a bit. Yeah, the other alternative is that possibly everybody's underestimating Indianapolis, that they are actually a lot better than most people thought. So their receivers were getting unbelievable separation. I was saying how to my roommate, that's just amazing how they seem to be able to get away from our coverage, and also the accuracy of the quarterback was he was right on with almost all of his passes. His accuracy is pretty unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, let me jump in. I'll give you time to finish, Chuck, but I just want to address that first part.
Sure.
I do think, and we do this every year, right? Through the first few weeks, we kind of recalibrate what we thought going into the year. And I think it's fair to say that Indianapolis is better than maybe we thought they would be, but they didn't punt once against the Broncos defense. So where I'm at is the Broncos defense being what it is, arguably the best in the NFL. The Colts offense isn't the best in the NFL, even with maybe us underestimating them. I still think that the Broncos defense, and to your point about the separation from the receivers, that would be a telltale sign that the Broncos defense was not performing at the level that we expect them to, right?
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with what you're saying. Yeah, those are good points. That's why I enjoy your program.
Yeah. Well, I think go ahead and finish. What was the second thing that you're going to bring up, Chuck?
Yeah, I was watching the replays. I am 83 years old, and my eyes aren't that good, but I was wearing my glasses, and my eyes have been pretty accurate when I've watched the replays. And there was one catch that was Tennessee. It was just off the ground, and what they didn't realize was that in the replay, I saw about 4 or 5 inches before it got to the receiver's hands, it hit the ground. And I said, well, when is the coach going to call that, throw out the flag? And nobody did, and there was no argument from anybody. So I don't know if you have access to any of the replays like that.
Do you remember which one? I'll say this just as an overarching point. I don't think the officials overall had a great day. I'll just say that there were a few times both ways. I thought there were some calls that went against Indy that I didn't think were right. There were some that went against the Broncos that weren't right. So I would just say overall it wasn't the finest day of officiating. Do you remember either when or who made that the catch that you're talking about? And I can go back and see.
I know there's so much tape, but it was I think it was the third quarter, and I think I have no idea who the receiver was, but the fact that it was just one of the throws that were the catch was just off the above the ground a little bit, so the receiver had to dive and just catch it off the turf, but it did hit the turf, which they completed pass. So
yeah, I'll look into it. The all 22 as well comes out tomorrow. I'll be able to look into that. Might have been either Pittman or Downs now that you're mentioning it, but I'll go back and look and see if I can't see it, Chuck.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to your explaining what that leverage is all about. I think I know what it is, but it's kind of ironic that they have rarely ever called that, and to see that they all of a sudden, I think it's very suspicious that they caught that and made a big and it just kind of got pushed through. And the replay, I think that the person took his hand off of the shoulder, and he actually just slept on his jumped on his own accord rather than having the leverage to use. So
yeah, well, thank you for the call, Chuck, and please call more often. I always love when people call in. I don't mind when people text, but calling in to me is a superior form of communication when it comes to sports talk radio. So appreciate you, Chuck. The leverage call, and this comes up in NFL games. To me, it's a situation where, is it letter of the law correct? Yes. Is it one that has to be called at that time? It's always that tug of war, right? Do you want the officials to enforce every single rule on the book to 100% accuracy and not let anything go? Or do you want them to have that leeway to say, all right, is this really gaining an advantage the way that leverage is supposed to be? To me, it was leverage. Like, I'll just say that. They didn't get the call wrong. But I understand the sentiment to say, really, you're going to call that? And then you look at the replay. You got to understand the referees are seeing this at full speed. So whether a hand quickly came off the back, whether, it looked like he kind of pushed down, it didn't. We have to extend the referees a little bit of credit. Like they don't get to see it like we do. I understand that that's an incredibly frustrating way to lose a football game. But what will really burn up Sean Payton is the comedy of errors that this team made on the margins. And I'll include that leverage penalty. He has built this team's identity on winning within the margins. Basically, when I talk about margins, what am I talking about? I'm talking about special teams, because we don't normally talk about special teams. That's winning on the margins. I'm talking about penalties, and I'm talking about timely mistakes. Right? Let's be honest. With as much as teams throw the football, not all interceptions are created equal, right? A lot of quarterbacks can get away with an early first quarter interception, as opposed to Bo Nix, who threw his interception in crunch time at the most important part of the game. But Sean Payton has built this Broncos team up to win in the margins, basically saying, you got to beat us. We may not be more talented than you are. We may not have the better quarterback than you do, which yesterday I don't believe. I believe Bo Nix is better than Daniel Jones. But I'm just saying on a week-to-week basis, the Broncos, especially now, 2 games, because there's the Joe Burrow injury. But let's say Burrow is healthy. It was shaping up to be 3 games in a row here where the Denver Broncos did not have the better quarterback. We're not going to have that. And that's a big determining factor in who wins on Sundays in the NFL, who has the better quarterback. But Sean Payton has tried to make up for that, especially with Bo Nix being young. Let's set aside how good he is or not good he is, depending on how you feel. Let's just talk about him being young, right? I'm going to make up for the fact that my quarterback is young and still developing, because I'm going to have everything else so buttoned up that you can't find another way to beat us. Right? And and you think about last year, the Colts game, for instance, the Colts game last year is a great example of this. That was the Broncos winning on the margins. You had that bonehead double pass that Indy tried, and Benito picked it off. Then you had Jonathan Taylor dropping the ball at the 1 yard line. I mean, those decided the game. But that's what Sean Payton has been doing since he arrived in Denver. His team was supposed to be the more buttoned up one so that the other team would commit the mistakes, right? In a league where most games are decided by one score, Sean Payton's like, we're not going to lose the game on the margins. And you think about, the first Raiders matchup or the Browns matchup late in the year, the mistakes by the opponent that ended up deciding the game. That's why Sean Payton, in addition to who it was against, but that's why the way they lost against the Chiefs last year really just ate them up, because that was losing on the margins. That was the Chiefs identifying a pattern of a weakness when it comes to kick protection, and they exploited it. That's winning in the margins. And those are the losses that drive Sean Payton crazy. I think Sean Payton, like the Baltimore game or even the playoff game against Buffalo, he's disappointed, but I think deep down he's like, well, we're not better than the Ravens and we're not better than the Bills, and they just blew us out. Tip of the cap and move on. It's the games where the Broncos lose in the margins that drive him the most crazy. Yesterday, you get the Bo Nix pick. You get the Dobbins spike for the delay of game penalty. You get Adam Troutman committing an offensive face mask. And then you get the leverage penalty against DeAndre Tillman. All of them are avoidable to some degree. Right? The Bo Nix interception, really bad timing. And Bo Nix on the pick, by the way.
I just missed.
Okay. But those are, especially for Bo Nix, as I've highlighted over the last week, interceptions are a big part of Bo Nix's game recently. But the throw itself, the interception itself, while avoidable, perhaps isn't as avoidable as, say, J.K. Dobbins' spike. Right? There's no need for that. There's no need to spike the ball. Why would you do that? And that's a veteran that's doing that. And then you get the leverage penalty. And the thing about that, and we could talk more about the call itself, but here's the thing about that final drive for the Colts. I thought they were losing the game with the way that they were moving the ball up the field. Shane Steichen was incredibly conservative, way too conservative. It's like he was okay getting like 2 or 3 yards a carry. He was running Jonathan Taylor against a 9-man box. He only threw it the one time, right? Did they even get to that superimposed target line that CBS put on the field? I don't think they did. I'm watching the Colts. I'm like, you got to get further downfield here. And lo and behold, they leave Schrader with a 60-yard field goal. If you're the Broncos and you're going out to defend the kick, you have to have in your mind, like, they messed up. They left themselves a 60-yard field goal. I know what Brandon Aubrey did in the Cowboys game, but I mean, 60 yards and beyond, even though there are more and more kickers that can make those, that's not an easy kick. So the Colts hurt themselves by, even slower than Hank Stram's teams used to matriculate the ball down the field. It was like 3 yards in a cloud of dust during a 2-minute drill. But the Colts have a 60-yard kick. There's got to be something in your head. I know that you would like to block the kick, right? Because if you block it, then there's no chance it goes in. But you have to say they are in a tough situation. We cannot help them. Whether you think it was the right call, the wrong call, whether it was the right call, but they shouldn't have called it at that point, you can't give anything. You can't make a mistake like that when the Colts have already put themselves in a difficult position. There has to be something in your head that, like, I got to be very careful. I want to block the kick, but I'm not even going to do anything close to what could be flagged, because the Colts have kind of done themselves in by leaving their kicker a 60-yard kick. You can't do that. The Dobbins spike and the Tillman leverage penalty are completely avoidable. The Knicks interception, the Troutman face mask, avoidable to a degree. Those other two things, there was no need for it. And it cost them. And the Broncos yesterday, again, I'll go back to the defense first and foremost, didn't have to come to any of that if the defense would have played at the level that we are expecting the Broncos defense to play at. But once that was the reality, once the Broncos defense was not going to be able to stop Daniel Jones the entirety of the day, then you got a game that you got to win within the margins, and the Broncos lost it. And here's the thing moving forward. I don't know the math here. We won't know for a long time whether that loss is a loss that keeps them from winning in division, getting a playoff spot, whatever it might be. We don't know that yet. But I do know one thing right this second. The storyline going into next week against the Chargers is, before the Broncos can beat the Chargers, they can't let the Colts beat them twice. Right? The way that game ended, the way that game unfolded, it's a tough one to move on from, as Sean Payton talked about after the game.
You know, there'll be a bitter taste in our mouth for a little bit, and it's because, you know, we put ourselves in a position to control that game late, and then it slipped out of our hands. So it's hard.
They did have every opportunity to close out that game and didn't. But again, I asked the question, given what you expect out of this Broncos defense, should it even got to that point? 719-24-7-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. This week's nominees for our Athlete of the Week, sponsored by Blackjack Pizza and Salads, are awaiting your vote. They are Silas Lambert of the Colorado Springs Christian football team, Katie Walderen from the Whitefield volleyball team, Devin Jane from the Vanguard School soccer team, and Salah Joyner. I apologize to the Joyner family. I only see these names via type. She is a fantastic freshman, though, for the Liberty softball team. So those are the nominees this week. You can log on to extrasports1300.com and cast your vote. And the winner, like Luke McAllister of Cheyenne Mountain last week, will join me on Friday. And once again, shouts to our sponsors at Blackjack Pizza and Subs for supporting local student athletes. Aaron called during the break, and he brought up a really good point about Jonathan Taylor's running. He ran for 165 yards yesterday when Vance Joseph said this the middle of last week.
The back is the key.
Not a great look that it seems like you're focusing on Jonathan Taylor and he runs for 165 yards, in addition to what he was able to do in the passing game, which we know about the big catch and run that he had in that game. But Aaron's point was there were multiple occasions where the Broncos had Jonathan Taylor wrapped up and couldn't finish the tackle. Now, he brought up Pat Surtain. I know he's the defensive player of the year. That's not necessarily, I mean, hey, if you get your hands on him, you got to bring him down, right? But Pat Surtain, I don't look at first and foremost. And he was just throwing him out there as an example and just saying there are a lot of players who couldn't bring down Jonathan Taylor. If you remember a week ago, John Franklin Myers pointed to the tackling. You know, we're focused on the space that the Tennessee receivers had to run, and we were obviously so focused on Bo Nix and the offense that we didn't really talk that much about Broncos' poor tackling. But in-house, John Franklin Myers is like, yeah, that's the thing that we didn't like about the game against Tennessee. And lo and behold, tackling was an issue. It wasn't like Jonathan Taylor was running against a three-man front the whole game. I don't know how many broken tackles he made. I mean, you lose count after a while. But that was something that the Broncos themselves identified and said, we got to be better going into week 2. They weren't. Now, one aspect of the Broncos game that was better, the offense, right? They ran the ball early in the game, and you saw the results going up against a defense that was missing its top 2 corners and its best pass rusher. But that's, you know, that's life in the NFL. You're going to have games like that. The Tampa game last year was similar, where you look back and you say, were the Broncos really better than that Tampa team? And then you look back at the injury report and go, oh, okay. But look, as bad as they were against the Tennessee Titans, it was much better. Yes, Indy was missing who they were missing, but it was definitely better from Bo Nix. But yet still the pick, right? As he continues to lead the NFL in interceptions over the last, what is it now? 7, 8 games. He went 10 games last year, a 10-game stretch where he threw all of 2 interceptions. And I think in the last now 8 games, and that's even throwing in the Kansas City game, he has like 8. But that was a black mark on what was, all in all, a very good day for Bo Nix. I have a hard time putting Bo Nix front and center in diagnosing why the Broncos lost that game. Yes, there was the pick late. You can't do it. You just can't. You can't have a mistake like that. And once again, who was he looking for? Cortland Sutton. It's getting to the point where it's not anecdotal anymore. What is it about Cortland's? And that was a game, as you know, they weren't even really looking at Cortland Sutton most of the day. And I said this going into the game. I said, don't look at this with the injuries that the Colts have. Don't look at this as Cortland Sutton's going to go off in this game. The opportunity for the Denver Broncos was to establish a secondary receiver. And I thought Troy Franklin was great. Marvin Mims had that touchdown early. Still don't know what the deal is with Evan Ingram. Is he still hampered by the injury, or is Sean Payton really saving him for this week when they play the Chargers? I don't know, but Evan Ingram I didn't even notice him in the first half. In the second half, I noticed him twice. Once on a catch and once on a false start. But I thought Troy Franklin clearly is emerging as the second receiving option on this Broncos team. We'll see if it keeps up, but Troy Franklin, the only wide receiver that was on the field more than Troy Franklin in week 1 was Cortland Sutton. And he was their most productive receiver yesterday. So Troy Franklin's becoming a thing for the Denver Broncos, certainly. But it was much better from Bo Nix. And it's not really a wonder, because we know why Bo Nix struggled as much as he did in week 1. Didn't run the football. Yesterday, Sean Payton ran the football, and everything else for Bo Nix worked better. Speaking of, so Sean Payton last week owns up to the play calling. Today, he owned up to another thing that cost the Denver Broncos the football game. I'll tell you what it is, and why has Sean Payton had to apologize in back-to-back weeks, being supposedly one of the best coaches in the NFL? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in hour 2 on this Monday, and it's all we're going to get. We have a Monday Night Football doubleheader for you starting at 5 with the Bucs and Texans, to be immediately followed by the Chargers and the Raiders. The winner of that game will be alone in first place in the AFC West. Appreciate you watching the show on a daily basis on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Handles all the same at XTRA Sports 1300. While you're there, you could give me your thoughts on the day. You can also like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff social media allows you to do. Or if you'd like to get in contact the traditional way, you could call or text into the show at 719-247-1313. Back-to-back weeks now to begin the season, Sean Payton is taking the blame for the faults of his team. Last week, he owned up to the terrible play calling and not establishing the run. And now today, he took ownership of the penalty that he says was a penalty. He is not pushing against the notion that that was leverage. He agreed with the call, but he took blame for it because he called an aggressive kick block on that when he shouldn't have. You know, I talked about this last hour. The Colts did themselves no favors. They were like walking the ball up the field, and they put their kicker in a really tough position, needing to nail a 60-yarder to win the game. And I said, you can't do anything remotely appearing like a penalty. The Colts are beating themselves by not getting their kicker in a decent range for a game-winning field goal. Don't help them. And the Broncos did. But Sean Payton is saying, and the same logic applies. I'll take Sean Payton at his word. Why is he trying to go all out to block a kick that's 60 yards away? Colts beat themselves on that, leaving a 60-yard field goal to win the game. And the Broncos bailed them out. But this is back-to-back weeks now where one of the 5 best coaches in the NFL is taking blame, not from you and me, from himself. Back-to-back weeks, Sean Payton has admitted to a grave error on his part. And I think it means 2 things. One, I think he's trying to take the pressure off of his team, but he's also feeling the pressure. You know, Sean Payton has written a lot of checks in just a short time with the Denver Broncos, right? I remember the first one is when he badmouthed Nathaniel Hackett. How did that go? It ended with the Jets putting Nathaniel Hackett on their shoulders like he's Rudy. That wasn't a great look. Ran off at the mouth. Immediately when he played the Jets, they lost. But he continues to up the ante. He continues to double down and make bolder and bolder claims about his football team. And there's an amount of pressure that comes along with that you're placing on yourself. And maybe it's leading to some poor judgment on Sean Payton's behalf. Now, I don't put, unlike week 1, because week 1, I'm with him 100%. that you want to put blame for why the Broncos failed to impress in week one. I look at Sean Payton first. I don't look at Sean Payton first yesterday. I don't. In fact, I don't even look at him as the coach first. Vance Joseph's got some splaining to do. Because that was a putrid performance by the Broncos defense. But if Sean Payton's saying he's the one that ordered the code red, if he's the one that instructed his team to go all out by any means necessary, trying to block this kick, okay. I'll give him the blame on that one. But as I started the show with, I start with the defense. Game didn't even need to come down to all of that. But for that, all right, Sean Payton, you want to take the blame? I'll blame you. You know, heavy is the head that wears the hype crown. And it's not like the people who are crowning the Denver Broncos as the offseason darling of the National Football League were just doing it independently. It started all the way back after the Bills loss in the playoffs, where he's like, he said we would have beaten the Chiefs. But he just continues to do this. And I think it's causing him to maybe be a little more aggressive than he should be, a little more impatient than he should be. But this is back-to-back weeks now where Sean Payton is taking the blame for one of the main things that went wrong for the Denver Broncos. And I don't think he's off the mark. It's not like he's owning up to poor play calling, because that wasn't the issue yesterday. So I think you have to take Sean Payton at his word. I guess Sean Payton gets off not scot-free, but he's a little bit off the hook, because I just think that the defense is where the Broncos were completely off the mark. Bad decision on the field goal, absolutely. Poor interception by Bo Nix late in the game, you bet. But the defense has to be better than that. Pat Surtain, this is from Luca Evans of the Gazette. Pat Surtain yesterday was targeted 9 times and allowed 7 catches for 63 yards. That's from Next Gen Stats. That's the most, tied for the most catches he's ever given up in a single game in his career. And the second most time he's been targeted. That's where you got to give the Colts a lot of credit yesterday. They were unafraid to go at Pat Surtain. It's not something that I would recommend on a week-in, week-out basis by Broncos opponents, but, you know, sometimes the easiest path is through. I mean, you kind of beat yourself a little bit if you're just like, we're going to ignore Pat Surtain and we're going to throw to the other side. That's playing into the Broncos' hands. And Shane Steichen's a bright, offensive-minded head coach. He's like, let's test him out. I'm sure it wasn't the plan to continually pick at Pat Surtain, but after you're able to complete a couple of passes, especially after, you know, the missed PI call in the end zone that would have went against Pat Surtain, I have to imagine that the Colts quietly on the sideline were like, he doesn't have it today. And they continue to go at him. Sometimes he had very good coverage. A lot of times, Pat Surtain had very good coverage. But I think the thing that sticks out more to me is that the Colts went at him more than the vast majority of teams that go up against the Denver Broncos. And give them credit for having those guts. But that encapsulates the day right there. I mean, if the reigning defensive player of the year gives up 7 catches on 9 targets, I don't know that you're going to, if I just told you that you were going to expect the rest of the Broncos defense to be great. It's kind of like with the Denver Nuggets. If I tell you that Nikola Jokic had a terrible game, did you expect the Nuggets to win that game? I'm sure it's happened on occasion, but your mind goes to, the Nuggets probably lost if Nikola Jokic is not getting a triple-double and he's not efficient from the field and he has fewer than 9 or 10 assists. So that stat right there, if you didn't watch the game, you could probably go, oh, the Broncos lost then, didn't they? And they did. But I start with up front. 1 sack. 1. Can't happen. You got too much blood and treasure invested in that front 7 to get to Daniel Jones once. And for it to be Justin Stranad and not even Benito or Zach Allen, the $200 million men that the Broncos have. It all starts with that. Everything with this Broncos team starts with that. If that's not right, nothing else is going to be, except maybe Pat Surtain. And just, unfortunately, yesterday for the Denver Broncos, he wasn't at the top of his game either. But it's that pass rush. The Broncos overwhelm you with their pressure, and it makes it easier for everyone behind. It covers up the fact that Singleton and Stranad are not good at covering running backs or tight ends or wide receivers in the middle of the field. They're just not. Singleton's never been good at it. And then the secondary, if they have to cover for longer, or if the pass actually gets downfield. Yesterday wasn't an instance for Riley Moss that, he just, the law of averages. He was just targeted so many times because they weren't throwing at Pat Surtain and he got burned. They were going at Pat Surtain equally, maybe more so than any other corner. I think this secondary is very good. They're not great. They're not the best. They have the best corner. But I think Riley Moss is a bit of a vulnerability. And I think eventually Jahdae Barron is going to take his job. Not week 3, but eventually I think Barron is going to line up opposite Pat Surtain. But you got to get the pass rush. You got to get the pass rush first. That's what this team is built on. This is what they do best. And when they're not able to do it, then you see the chain reaction and everything else fail for the Denver Broncos. Take your thoughts on the Broncos 29-28 loss, and we'll continue with this Monday edition of the show after this. Big game this Saturday at Falcon Stadium as Air Force takes on preseason Mountain West favorite Boise State. Kickoff is at 5 p.m. If you would like to go, I have a 4-pack of tickets for that game. Just be the 13th texter to text Falcons and your name to 719-247-1313. And of course, if you don't win the tickets from me, you can always purchase them at aftickets.com. Just little college football in the mix here on this Monday. Jay Norvell has announced that Braden Fowler-Nicolosi will be the starter for CSU, and I am not surprised because I thought that him saying it was a quarterback competition was merely a motivating tactic for Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, and we'll see how he responds to that little motivational nudge against UTSA this weekend. And meanwhile, in Boulder, I don't even know if you can fairly judge Ryan Staub. Really, based on that Houston game. I certainly, he had that one run at the end of the first half that was good. I mean, it just it was fine. I didn't think it was overly impressive, the body of work, but the guy ran, what did they run, 5 plays in the third quarter? Deion Sanders doesn't have to worry about nobody bringing up the defense. He wanted everyone to bring up the defense, thought we were picking on poor Pat Shurmur for the offensive woes, and he wanted to know about the defense. Well, people are going to ask about the defense because that was awful. That was an awful defensive performance by the Colorado Buffaloes. So much so that I don't even know that you can fairly judge Ryan Staub. I still think what I said about the move, I still agree. I think it's a panic move. I think they're painting themselves into a corner that they won't be able to get out of. And I certainly didn't see a ton from Ryan Staub to make me go, oh, yeah, he should definitely be in over Caden Salter. Had his moments, but that game is on the defense. And for Deion Sanders to say how shocked he was. I mean, they're a team right now that just, I think Mark Johnson put it the best, the Buffs play-by-play guy on Saturday. They're a team, and I may be not quite quoting him verbatim, but they're a team that doesn't know what it's good at right now. Like, if you're the Colorado Buffaloes, what are you hanging your hat on? And I'm not even saying hanging your hat on as far as, well, we're definitely going to be better than our opponent in this one area. I'm just talking about what can you count on week in and week out to be good. Maybe it's still not good enough to beat your opponent, but what are you good at? Punting. And I don't mean that to demean the skill of punting, right? But that's the one thing that I've seen so far from the Colorado Buffaloes that week in and week out is consistently good. Nothing else is. They don't know what they're good at, and they might not be good at anything. That may be the issue here, which is a little bit hard to figure considering we're now in year 3. And I'm not even expecting the Colorado Buffaloes to challenge for a Big 12 title here. I don't have the loftiest expectations for this team. They might not be good at anything in particular. I mean, you've seen in 2 of these 3 games, Georgia Tech and Houston just dominate in the trenches. Houston was on the field for all of basically the entirety of the third quarter. How can you expect a guy making his first start of the season to be able to get any kind of rhythm? I'm not going to hold it against Ryan Staub that on that one drive, he couldn't get anything going. I mean, it just, they continue, take which side of the football you want. This is a team that right now, 3 weeks in the season, they have no answers. They don't know who their quarterback is. They don't know what they're good at. They don't know what they can do. They don't know who they can rely on. Now, the one saving grace for this team, Georgia Tech looks pretty good, right? We may look back at the end of the season and say Georgia Tech and Houston were two pretty good teams. Georgia Tech more so than Houston. But the Georgia Tech loss isn't in and of itself a bad loss. I think some of the ways that the Buffs lost that game were bad. But Georgia Tech clearly proved this weekend that they're legit in the ACC. But they're in that game at halftime. And look, I didn't feel like they were in a great spot. I didn't feel like they were the better team through the first half, but they were in it. Make some halftime adjustments, build on what you've done well, and maybe you have a chance to win the game. And then the third quarter, because that's the thing, the other team gets to make adjustments too at halftime. And Houston just dominated the Buffs in the third quarter, and that was a wrap. Things not that much better for Air Force either. I thought they were able to run the football, but you can't turn the ball over twice. I mean, the Air Force's entire identity is on ball security and clock management. And you're coughing up the football twice before the game really gets going. And I thought all three teams, bring CSU back into the mix, I thought all three teams had a chance to be pretty good. Still early, but all three of them have very much failed to impress. 719-24-7. 13-13. Got one last segment, and then we got that Monday night doubleheader. Should be a good one. I wasn't really into the Sunday night football game last night, if I'm being honest about it. But these two games tonight, very interesting. Tampa, Houston, first up at 5, and then right after that, it'll be the Raiders and Chargers right here on Extra Sports 1300. Trans-Siberian Orchestra is returning to Colorado Springs for 2 shows at the Broadmoor World Arena on November 16th. Tickets are on sale right now and are available online at axs.com or in person at the Pikes Peak Center box office. Speaking of tickets, congratulations to Marlon, who won the 4-pack of tickets to see Air Force take on Boise State Saturday. Be giving away more of those tickets through the week, as well as Switchbacks tickets because they are at home. We get both Air Force and Switchbacks gone over the weekend, and now they're both back, and brings up conflicts with those of us who attend both of those teams' games. I heard Dan Patrick talking on his Above the Noise commentary earlier in the show, talking about week 1 overreactions. And there were a fair amount of them. He brought up the Detroit game. I don't know. I looked at Detroit losing to Green Bay as more of, I think Green Bay's that good. So the fact that the Lions bounced back in a huge way against the Bears does not surprise me. The Steelers game, I will say that one surprised me. But I think one team that any reaction you had to week 1 cannot be an overreaction, Denver Broncos. Right? It's not that this team is unlucky not to be 2-0. It's that this team is fortunate not to be 0-2. For a team that has put so much emphasis on a fast start, they're stuck in the mud. Last week it was the offense. Yesterday it was the defense. And that's all you got. Right? You got these 2 matchups at the beginning of the season. You thought that they were good matchups. And yeah, maybe the Colts turn out to be better than everyone thought they would be. But still, you don't force a single punt. You have supposedly the best defense in the NFL, and you don't force a single punt. So there's a middle ground here where, like, yeah, maybe the Colts are a lot better than we thought they would be, but come on, this is the Broncos defense. This is a team that spent $222 million on its pass rushers this offseason, and neither one of them could sack Daniel Jones. You have to look really close to find the difference between the way that the Broncos defense performed against the Colts and the way that the Dolphins performed against the Colts. And that's not a good comparison. That's not a team that you want to be compared with. And now here we go. The ramp up is done now. Broncos got to have both sides of the football, and let's not ignore special teams, especially given how the game was decided on a special teams play or ended on a special teams play. You got to be right on all 3 phases next week. You got the Chargers. Divisional game, team that swept you last year. The Broncos got to be right for Sunday. As disappointing as this start is, losing to LA, it's going to be full-on panic. Well, we'll get more into the Chargers as the week goes on. The next week, though, it's looking up. So maybe if you look at the bigger picture, you say, I don't know how good I feel about the Broncos going against the Chargers, but maybe they have a chance to make up for the Colts loss by beating Cincinnati without Joe Burrow. And that's my biggest takeaway from the first 2 weeks of the season. I just pulled up ESPN.com. I know the NFL is king, right? So if there are headlines in the NFL, they're going to go with those first. But here's their top headlines. Commanders Daniels has knee injury, status iffy. Next one, sources, Vikes McCarthy out 2 to 4 weeks. Then it's Brian Kelly being a jerk. Not surprising. Then Burrow, toe surgery to miss 3 months. Then there's this story about Arch. He was getting booed the other day. Arch Manning. The prince I was promised is already getting booed by Texas fans. And then, not that it matters given the way the Bears have looked the first 2 weeks, but they got a corner that's out. Cowboys got an injury. Broncos have been dealing with Dre Greenlaw being out. They haven't had him yet. That's probably the most sane takeaway that you can have. The one thing that won't have you accused of overreacting. Already the injuries are starting. And Joe Burrow being out greatly changes the way you look at that Monday night game. T. Higgins will still be out there, so you have to do something about him, but makes a difference when Joe Burrow's throwing him the football. But that's the thing. The NFL is a war of attrition, right? It normally is. But two, especially when you're at the Broncos level, which is a wild card team, which is that 7th seed. I mean, it's just about surviving. Right? If you just survive 17 games with health and not beating yourself and taking care of the teams that you're better than, and that's how you get that 7 seed. These 7 seeds that go into the playoffs every year, most likely you look and it's just because the other teams around them faltered in one way or another, either with their play or more accurately, in most cases, their injuries. And that's part of why yesterday, I think, really stings the Denver Broncos, on top of, the way they lost and losing on the margins. Yeah, the Colts could be better than we thought they were, but I still think that the Broncos are capable of being better than Indianapolis. And that was how the Broncos feasted last year. Right? They feasted on the teams they were better than. And then when they punched above their weight class, they were no match, but they got a lot of wins against teams that were lower than them in the standings. And the Colts should be one of those teams. And here's another sign that things are continuing with the 2024 version of the Denver Broncos. Another one-score game they lost. Another one-score game, 1-6 last year in games decided by one score. 1-6. And that's the practical way that you can look at the Denver Broncos and say, how are they going to get more wins, right? Trying to figure out the math to get them on top of the AFC West. Win more one-score games. Fortunate to win a one, pushing the limit of a one-score game. It was 8 points. One possession, I guess, would be the better, way to put that. But then you lose yesterday in one-score game. Broncos aren't going to have more wins if they don't win more one-score games. Sean Payton is good enough. This team is good enough. A lot of their games are going to be decided by one score, one possession. And that's why Sean Payton was so distraught about yesterday.
There'll be a bitter taste in our mouth for a little bit, and it's because we put ourselves in a position to control that game late, and then it slipped out of our hands. So it's hard.
Yep, that's who he's built this Broncos team up to be, the ones that won't beat themselves. And yesterday they did a fair amount of that. But the universe tends to even itself out. And now you're looking at a quarterback not named Joe Burrow coming into Empower Field in a couple weeks' time. That is 3 months. 3 months, not 3 weeks, 3 months. And given the fact that the Bengals, despite all they put into trying to get off to a better start, they haven't been super impressive, have they? And now you're losing Burrow for 3 months. That might be, maybe I'm overreacting. That might be it for the Bengals. That might be a wrap. And that was one of the teams that I thought for sure was going to get a wild card spot. It's one more wild card contender that the Broncos don't need to worry about, probably. Now you got to beat them. But yeah, that's the worst injury. McCarthy out for 2 to 4 weeks. Yeah, it throws a wrench in Minnesota's plan. But did you watch the football game last night? Yeah, here's another non-overreaction to the first couple weeks of the season. Chicago Bears aren't any better. There, you want to talk about a team that looks like the 2024 version of themselves, Bears. And Collinsworth said it last night. You've got 7 bad quarters and 1 good quarter of football from Minnesota so far. And it's that one quarter that people chose to focus on. And I said it after that game on Monday night, like I think it was more about Chicago than Minnesota. Vikings at home going against a better team, but not an infinitely better team in Atlanta, and they got their butts kicked. Maybe it'll be a question for tomorrow because I'm very interested in all 4 of these teams tonight. But maybe tomorrow we'll ask, who do you know for a fact is good? Because think about if the Chargers lose tonight after what they did to Kansas City and how Herbert looked. If they lose tonight, are you ready to call the Raiders good? You out on the Chargers? And then there's Tampa that they put up numbers, and maybe with the Atlanta win last night, you look at beating Atlanta, even though it came down to a missed field goal by Younghoe Koo. Maybe you look at it and it looks like an even better win because of the way Atlanta looked last night, but Tampa just barely got by. Team that I thought that they were coming into the year were definitely better than. And then Houston, what do they muster? 9 points? I know the Rams defense is really good, but yeah, so there are definitely some teams that haven't turned the page, haven't improved, evolved from what they were a year ago. And Philadelphia and Green Bay, I think pending tonight's results, I think we're all on the same page about Philadelphia and Green Bay. I don't know how many other teams that you're willing to put your reputation on the line and say they're really good. But we'll see, comb through what else Sean Payton had to say. And I said this earlier, first task for the Denver Broncos is to put the Colts behind them. That's going to be one that sticks with them. That's going to be one that you're going to look back on for weeks. Maybe it costs them ultimately in the end. Maybe it doesn't. We don't know that yet, but it's one that you're going to look at, especially if the Broncos are able to get a win next week. You're going to be like, how do they lose the Colts? But yeah, you got to turn the page from the Colts because this is one of those very big games. I don't care that it's in week 3. They can't get swept by the Chargers. And the Chargers, even though those games ended up being a one-score game, one-possession game, Broncos kind of went through the back door on those. Those games were not quite as close as the final score would tell you. And if they put up performance tonight against the Raiders, knocking off 2 divisional opponents, looking for the sweep of the first leg across the AFC West, it's going to be a tough one on Sunday going up against the Chargers. But that's what we got coming up for you. We got first Tampa and Houston. That one kicks off right after the top of the hour here. And then it will be that AFC West showdown between the Fighting Ashton Genties and the LA Chargers. And you can listen to those games on the radio, also stream them through the app and extrasports1300.com. One other thing I want to get to before I go, I'm telling you, if you've been thinking about, I'm sure you've heard plenty of ads. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it plenty. Testosterone replacement therapy. If you've been thinking about it, or if you notice, you're not quite feeling yourself, maybe a little bit more run down, maybe a little bit crabbier than normal. And it's not just because of the football game yesterday. It may not just be aging. It may be that your T levels are low and it's affecting every part of your life. I would recommend getting your levels checked. Low T Center, Synergenics. They're the experts in this. They've been doing it for a long time. I've heard from many clients of theirs that are raving about the results, and all it takes to start is a simple blood test. Go in 15, 20 minutes, come back, and you'll know. And then if you do need testosterone replacement therapy, if that is right for you, you can even choose whether you're doing it in the clinic or at home. Could be a game changer for you. Book your appointment now at fixmylowt.com. That's fixmylowt.com, and you'll be wishing you did it sooner. Appreciate your patronage. Any texts based on Sunday's game, I'll get to those tomorrow, and we'll continue with the Broncos conversation, loop in some other stuff as well. Right now, well, not right now, after this break, enjoy a Monday night doubleheader. First, Tampa, Houston, to be followed by Vegas and the Chargers.